All right, we're going to get started. Thank you very much for being with us today. This is in our series, our virtual town hall series, which is a forum for sharing economic ideas amidst a pandemic. My name is Tim Hines. I'm the executive director of the University Economic Development Association, and we're very pleased to bring this series with you throughout the issues that our world is seeing at this time. Um, we are recording this session, so please, if you do have colleagues that would like to review it, we'll be sharing it on our social media channels within the next few days. How this will work, I'm going to give you just a brief overview of UEDA, talk a little bit about our agenda, and introduce you to our panel today, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So I'll go over that agenda shortly. But first, for those of you joining us that may not be familiar with UEDA, the University Economic Development Association connects our members, which are higher education institutions, private sector businesses, and economic development organizations, to resources that help facilitate economic growth within our communities. Never before has academia, the private sector, and economic stakeholders been so reliant on one another to create economic opportunity, and never before has economic opportunity been so critical. So our members, who are those on the cutting edge of modern economic development, work together to expand economic opportunity within their communities by utilizing the elements of talent, innovation in place, and recognizing the interconnectedness of each of these elements. We're going to see that on Showcase today, and for more information about UEDA, please visit our website at universityeda.org, and that's on your screen there. So again, our agenda today, presentation, we're going to have about probably more along the lines of 30 minutes of our presentation today. Let our speakers talk about their experiences. And then we'll open it up for Q&A for our panel. But then after that, we're going to open it up to the entire audience and ask you all if you have any ideas or thoughts or questions for each other. The idea is that we're creating these virtual town halls as a way to not only understand best practices that are happening, but then also to put that into practice and actually ask each other big questions that our individual regions are dealing with. So think about questions that you might want to ask your colleagues from across the country and across the world, and we'll have time for those at the very end. But first, let's talk a little bit about our panel today. So as political, social, and economic landscapes continue to shift within our world, it's more important than ever for organizations to delve into pillars of social equity and justice that aid in creating stronger management and development protocols. The topics covered today are going to include Alabama A&M's economic recovery efforts and how social justice and equity play a role in race, culture, unconscious bias, and the season for change, developing trust in how to move forward. So I'm going to introduce first Dr. Teresa Merriweather-Orrock. She is a sought-after professional for her leadership in community engagement and collaborative skills and achievements in research, development, and community and economic development. Dr. Merriweather is a native of Jackson, Tennessee, and has spent more than 28 years in higher education in the states of Georgia and Alabama. And further, she serves as a research consultant with Thurgood Marshall College Fund Incorporated, where she provides research and evaluation to support its 47 publicly assisted HBCU member schools. Dr. Orrock received her training at Lane College, Jackson, Tennessee, Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia, Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia, Union Institute and University in Cincinnati, Ohio, and postdoctoral training at Harvard University, and she has attended Madison County, Tennessee public schools. So imagine doing all that training, Dr. Orrock, virtually. I'd like to introduce also her husband, Dr. Michael Orrock. He's a thought leader, scholar, seasoned administrator, and tenured professor of higher education, accreditation reviewer, consultant, and higher education strategist. He's also an author and servant leader who has amassed more than 30 years of progressively responsible experiences in working with diverse higher education institutions and national educational organizations. Dr. Orrock holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Central State University in Ohio and a master's in management and supervision in public administration from Central Michigan University and a PhD in political science from Atlanta University, which is now Clark Atlanta. Additionally, he holds a doctorate in biblical studies from Bethany College and theological summary in, is it Dothan, Alabama, I believe? Is that how you pronounce it? Dothan? And Dr. Orrock is the past president of the Rho Eta Lambda chapter of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, where he is a life member. And lastly, but certainly not least. We have Dr. Joshua Mercury. Dr. Mercury currently serves as the Chief Operations Officer for the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority. In his prior leadership positions, he comes with enthusiasm, energy, and passion, with the desire to make a difference before making a change in the platform of any organization. His background in social, economic, and educational development are extensive. Some highlights from his career include serving as a successful school superintendent, director of the Center for African American Male, director of the Honors Program, vice chairman of operations, vice chairman of programs, departmental chairman, and is a professor with tenure. Dr. Murphy has also served as the 14th superintendent of schools in Albany, Georgia. And in his role, he did not waste any time outlining new directions for the system with the desire to improve community collaborative efforts and parental involvement that led to a reduction in dropouts and improvement in promotion and performance for students. His dedication to students and encouraging positive change has impacted the lives of thousands. In 2019, he received the recognition as the Mentor Organization's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. And he was not driving, that he is a passenger. So I'll make that declaration as well as I turn things over to Dr. Teresa to kick us off. So welcome everyone and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim and Dominique and your team for having us today. It is certainly a pleasure for us to be here and to share with you very briefly our vast experiences and over the past couple of months, our overwhelming experiences in dealing with this coronavirus and its impact in particular within the state of Alabama, at Alabama A&M University through our Center for Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Economic Development. Needless to say that we have certainly witnessed a time like never before within our country, across the globe. From an economic standpoint, this pandemic has closed the doors of our businesses, both large and small, agencies, and even faith-based institutions. And so what I want to say just very briefly is in a nutshell to kind of talk about what we have done as an HBCU, a land grant, 1890 institution located in Huntsville, Alabama, in the northern tier of Alabama. Immediately upon recognition that this was a pandemic, I was asked by the Alabama State Legislative Caucus to come aboard and to begin working with small and minority businesses from across the state of Alabama. And so we have already garnered a few lessons learned from that experience. First of all, we understood that our task would be very great here, that our businesses were already economically challenged. And then of course, with the onset of this pandemic, then we saw many of them closing their doors. We're not sure now how many of them will be able to reopen because many of them were already very fragile, were without resources. And so this has really become hard hitting in terms of the foundation for many of these businesses. So I'm going to stop now and let the other gentlemen offer their input, but I will come back to talk about our possible path forward post-COVID, what we have developed as key strategies for moving our small and minority businesses from across the state of Alabama into another direction. So I will stop now. So if Dr. Joshua or Dr. Michael, if you all want to chime in and kind of talk about where we are from an economic and social landscape and how we got there and our possible path for emerging from this situation that we find ourselves.
Okay, I will take lead from Dr. O'Rourke. How you doing, Michael?
Sure, I'm doing well, my brother.
All right.
Let me just say this. I do appreciate the invitation to speak. one of the things that we have discovered based on research that we've done for years and years and years in the minority communities and working at historically Black colleges and universities, we have recognized that what we have is structural. We have several structural system deficiencies. Those structural system deficiencies have been highlighted as a result of what we're dealing with now with the COVID situation. It is not that what we're experiencing now in minority communities, it is not anything new to us. It is just that it has become more prevalent because the light is being shared by the devastation that we're experiencing with the COVID situation. So those deficiencies that have existed in many communities and subgroups and groups across the landscape has caused us, therefore, to have to rethink how we do business and how we relate to individuals in these areas. So my major interest is in the area of social justice and equity. In order for us to deal with social justice and equity, therefore, is to zero in on how we address the inequities in society and the social inequity and social justice inequity that has brought us to this point, that has created these structural system deficiencies historically. And therefore that has become a destructive element in societies as we're experiencing them today. So the narrative then has to shift from what we are looking at to what happened in the past that brought us here. So there is historical antecedent, there is historical dimension to it. So that will shape the social dynamics, social political dynamics in society, that brings everyone to the table, that therefore introduces us to the concept that you cannot stand alone to do what it is that we need to do to move us to the front. So if we're going to bring all communities, all social groups to the table, then certain things have to change. I just want to put some information out here that I was reading literature, and I shared this with my wife, that I was reading something and I ran into something that Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend, said some years ago before he passed. Someone interviewed him and asked him, how would we bring poor minority people to the table? How do we bring them to the forefront? How do we bring them into the social progress of American society? King simply answered this and said to the individual that was interviewing him and said, you know, we always talk about this proverbial thing that we always said, poor people have to be pulled up by their proverbial bootstrap. And he said, it is really social injustice for us to ask a man or woman to be pulled up from his bootstrap when he has no boots.
Mm.
So how can you pull someone up? How can someone pull themselves up from their bootstrap when they have no boots? So that is the foundation of the problem. Everyone has to have a boot in order to be pulled up from the bootstrap. And I'm just going to rest it right there. And then Dr. Murphy, take it.
Thank you very much, Doctors O'Rourke and O'Rourke. When you think about this, serving as the CEO of the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority that owned the fifth largest safety net hospital in this country, Grady Hospital, we had to put it in perspective because there are a lot of communities and a lot of businesses around us that were not ready. We work with about 110 partners who actually deal with social determinants of health. And when COVID-19, this coronavirus hit, people were not prepared, and they were ill prepared to say, if we had to close our businesses today, how could we survive? We put it in this perspective. You've been running a business for 10 years. You should have a percentage of dollar bills in the bank somewhere as capital, as asset. If this occurred, you should have the technology you need to help support your business throughout. When you look at businesses surviving around in our communities, these are the businesses who you can go through a line and still pick up your food. You can still socially distance. You mentioned, Dr. O'Rourke, what churches are doing, but there are a lot of churches who are not able in the faith-based community to stay open. And more importantly, in a business like a hospital setting, it's difficult to tell people not to come to the hospital, if you will, to the emergency room. But there are businesses now who are suffering to the point that they are closed. Preparation is key. And where we are right now, Dr. O'Rourke, with other things happening in this country, with some of the unrest, some of the chaos, it makes it even more difficult. But one thing I heard in all of the research, and I start following, if you will, Albany, Georgia, Dougherty County, Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital, serving over 41 counties of 159 counties in the state of Georgia. They quickly moved from 24 deaths to 100 deaths to 204 to over 1,100, 1,300, 1,400 people who got sick, and so many people hospitalized, because at some point in time, social distance for some people didn't mean the same thing. That was the other conceptual framework. When people had to stop the socially distance, they still thought that they still could hang out. People have to start believing what the epidemiologists are saying, what the biophysiologists are saying, what everyone is saying about this next wave. We're 3 weeks outside of Memorial Day. We're 2 weeks outside of July the 4th. And right after that, we'll have Labor Day. People need to be prepared. If not, there will be businesses and business upon suffering. Then the other thing, our leaders in this country, as we talk, must clearly understand we got to go beyond the figures of life in terms of dollar bills, but also human nature. They should have closed states earlier, closed colleges earlier, and said to people, you just cannot do this. This is something we don't know. This is something we can't even find a vaccine for right now. And I want you all to begin to study in Alabama, as we're studying in Georgia. Your departments of health and even that mental health must clearly understand that remdesivir, one of the things that kind of slows down, but not yet a cure for this whole pandemic. How do we get it in neighborhoods that might be needed more than others? And we've been studying now that we have to even apply for that medication to go in certain communities and even in certain hospitals. So I want to stop here and pause so we can move to the next, Dr. O'Rourke and Tim and Dominique.
Okay. Dr. Michael. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening to Dr. Michael's piece. So going forward, and Dr. Mercury is absolutely right. We are dealing with, within the minority, within the Black and Brown communities, issues within our small businesses where there is a lack of resources for those businesses to maintain their positions within the community. And so what we are positioned to do through the university, and I'm working day and night with our small businesses across the state, is that first of all, we want to just not only provide the training, but we want to make sure that our small businesses have the deliverables that they really need. We are working with our small businesses to build their capacity in terms of HR. What does HR really mean? While they may only have 1 or 2 employees now, we're looking at opportunities for growth. And so that means that these businesses will have to become compliant within the HR realm. The management, how do you manage people? How do you begin to understand issues of diversity and culture within this arena? And also, the most critical issue for most of our businesses is that their lack of technology or access to technology, as Dr. Mercury has so pointed out. They lack the digital and virtual platforms that would have permitted them to remain open and to remain vibrant, and in many instances, even resilient during this time. And so we are working with several entities across the state, across the nation, to ensure that our minority businesses receive the kind of information that we're going in, helping them to build the platform, not just giving them the information, but to help them to build the platform that they need in order to endure the next wave of this epidemic or the next disruption that will undoubtedly occur within our society. And then, of course, we want also for our businesses to begin to look at proper and strategic ways in which they may pivot. You know, what we did before may not be suitable as we move into post-COVID. What our product line was before may not be suitable. So how do we become very focused on the market and become market driven within this environment? And so we want to begin to take our business leaders through strategic planning, through business development planning, so that they really understand their capabilities, that they understand the opportunities that are out there, and that they position themselves to take advantage of those opportunities. And then finally, we want our small and minority businesses to understand that capital development is very real in terms of their being able to move from one spectrum to another. And so we want to align our small businesses with capital potentials, be it banks or alternative funding sources or whatever it is, but to establish that relationship before they need that relationship. Because oftentimes when our small businesses need capital, then they are without the relationships at these financial institutions to acquire the capital. So those are just some of the kinds of things that we're doing. It is a very heavy lift for those of you who understand working within our rural communities. I must say that I have worked in Huntsville. My husband and I, Dr. Michael and I, for the past 13 years. And as we used to say within the state of Georgia, that there is Huntsville, there's Birmingham, and there are a few other cities, and then there's the rest of Alabama. And so we have some of the most economically challenged areas within the state of Alabama. And those are the areas that we're prepared to go in to spend time. We've already have written proposals to secure funding so that we can better address our small businesses' needs within the state of Alabama. The other thing that I want to throw out, and I'm sure that Dr. Michael and Dr. Josh will really embellish this thought. It is about trust. Having a trusted resource around all of these issues. I think that that's the thing that this pandemic has brought about, is that the level of mistrust within communities, within our ecosystems, within across the globe. And so I think that that's the thing that we really have to spend time on. And I know that our time now is very short, and this is a whole nother discussion that we should have. But how do we begin to build trust? All of these things that we're talking about will not take place unless there is trust within our systems, trust within our environments. And I'll stop here. We can't hear you, Josh.
When we run into organizations, Dr. O'Rourke, like we have here on the phone today, that want their constituents and their stakeholders to listen, I pulled some data from Pandemic's Micro, M-A-C-R-O, impact. Just look at box offices from May 29 to June the 4th, 248,292. A year ago, $251,082,037. When you look at steel products and you look at the pound, $1,875 a year go to $1,195. When you look at hotel occupancy, with some of our major hotels closed, you talked about trust. Trust brings about collaboration. If we can get some of these organizations in communities with support, that support means dollar bills, funding, capital assets, whatever, we've got to begin to build that. Once you show them something of this nature and you start saying the hotel average daily rate went from $124 down to $82, you're saying this nation is starving for trust. They are starving for the opportunity. They need organizations like On This Phone. They need organizations like the participants on this phone, and they need to collaborate with each other. And then it comes together and it's diffused into a oneness that can help. And you're right, this pandemic in some sense has brought us closer together, but at the same time, in some sense has separated us. But thank you.
I just want to mention that the data is showing that let me just go to the African American community. African American community constitutes 13% of the US population. The Hispanic community constitutes about 6% of the US population. And then you can go down the line. I think the Asian population is about 2% of the US population. But when you look at the incident of what COVID has done to these communities, and we keep hearing that the majority of individuals that are affected by COVID arise from the minority communities. So we have to begin to ask the questions. How did we get to that point? How is it that these minority communities are the ones that are most affected by the COVID virus? So the answer becomes simple to those of us who have been doing research in this area. The answer is very simple because I think that Dr. Teresa Roth talks about the state of Alabama. If you talked about below the Mason-Dixie line, which we call SAP of the United States, that's from. Let's not worry about New York for a minute because we know why it happened so much in New York. But what I'm talking about, I am talking about endemic situations, systemic endemic situations that has caused people not to be able to access healthcare, that has caused people not to be able to access good drinking water, that caused people not to be able to access good food. So when we shut everything down, you have to ask yourself the question. We shut everything down. We are asking folks to stay at home. So now we are actually adding one layer of the devastation to an already deplorable situation for those who live below the Mason-Dixie line, which is most of these communities that have disadvantaged individuals. So what we are trying to do now is to bring that to the table for those who have not been at the forefront recognizing the problems, that these are the problems. Let's not put bandages on wounds that have been festering for so long. Let's not put bandages on them. We need a cure for this thing. And in order to have a cure, we have to have some investments. We have to infuse some capital into many of these areas because that will be the cure. The cure is not to offer people welfare. Most of these individuals don't want a handout. I have talked, people always say, well, poor people want welfare. Believe me, many poor people do not want welfare. They would like to be pulled up by their proverbial bootstrap. They just don't have any boots. You can't ask them to be pulled up when they don't have any boots. So let's give them some boots. And those boots are in the nature of infusing capital. And that's what we want to try to do, infuse capital into devastated areas so that people will be self-sufficient, so that when something like this happens again, we will not be found wanting.
Dr. Murphy. Okay, yes. And if Dr. Murphy wants to, yes.
Okay, and I think about the opportunities. When you are this, there are minority business enterprises out there who can help. Rather than to hand somebody something, they say, hey, give me an opportunity, give me a job to use my skills to be a part of what you're doing. And I go back to some of the things I've seen in Alabama and I've seen in Georgia and Mississippi. People are happier when they have a below the Mason-Dixon line. They're happier when you allow them to use the skills that they have to employ or to utilize in a situation. That's what I want to add to what Dr. Michael O'Rourke was saying. So thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, so we are at 1:32. Dominique and Tim, I'm not sure how you want us to conclude here, but it has certainly been a pleasure. This is just a brief conversation that we're having today. Certainly, the situation is much more complex, much more in depth, and I think that we need to spend more time dealing with this. And also the civil unrest that we find ourselves in this country. I know that Dr. Mercury is also a part of the 100 Black Men. That's a very progressive organization of very professional men from across the country. Some of your top scientists, your lawyers, your doctors, all are part of this organization. Dr. Murphy, do you want to just kind of briefly talk about some of the work that you all are doing around some of these hot spots that are taking place and what that means? And I can also say Dr. Murphy's background is in sociology.
And psychology, yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
A graduate of Howard University, Valdosta State, Fort Valley State, and Albany State Universities, respectively. And when you look at some of the hot grounds of this civil unrest, we've got to think, and this is kind of help we need. But every person that's on this call today is when we look at a statewide reform, that we try to work with police officers to educate them. And I have to go there because some of the things you've seen and some of the things we continue to see should not happen in America. And I always say, America, we can do better. Education is key here to help us deal with police assessment, police profiling, implicit and unconscious bias. When I walk into the room, somebody shouldn't say, well, he's probably no good because he's this kind of person. When you don't even know me, spend some time. You use the word about business, but that same word of trust and understanding can be used even in this, something that we're dealing with every day. I'm talking about Dr. King. Dr. King said, people are not allowed to have a voice. They will riot. They will protest. And now people who lose, yeah, we have to separate the bad folks from the good folks who saying, I need someone to listen to me, I need to hear. And I tell America, don't listen to me with your ears because it'll go to your head too fast. Listen to me with your entire body so it'll go to your heart. And when people start talking about how do we de-escalate certain things, why do officers do this? Are officers so mad at some people, if you will, Black and brown people, to the point that they die for no reason when in fact it's education. It's education, but then I hear Dr. O'Rourke that someone said to us, say, we need to legislate. Well, you cannot legislate bias. You cannot legislate systemic racism. That's something you have to talk about, understand, get people. If we ever want, and defunding the police department, you got to be careful saying I'm defunding the police department. You got the people who to protect and to serve the people they're supposed to be serving. So you have to be careful. So we want to continue that whole aspect. And then we have to evaluate the structure. You got to evaluate something. You're talking about evaluate and assess the structure that we find ourselves in to make sure that we control some of this. That there must be some kind of control and there must be some answers, because whether you arrest me, driving while Black, walking while Black, talking while Black, lying on the ground while Black, we've got to say this is not the key. And every police is not a bad police officer. We already know that. We've got to change the mindset and the structure in this country, home of the brave and for the free, as we call it. We've got to be there as a people in this nation. We can help it as all of us. We all have to be on the same front.
Okay.
I just want to put a little plug in there before we go on the protesting and the police issue. Several years ago, I had a chance to work in training and development. I did assessment centers for police officers, and I was very familiar with police training. Very familiar with police training manuals. And let me just say this, because a lot of people may not know this. In order for police officers to do what police is supposed to do, adequate policing, we have to change the training structure for police officers. let me let you in on something. When you look at a police manual, pick up any police manual across the United States. There are two things that makes a police officer powerful: the badge and the gun. Those are the two powerful tools that a police officer has: a badge and a gun. The badge gives him the legal authority. The gun gives him the authority to restrain and the authority to terminate a threat. So what you have then is that in that manual, the manual that I used to know, I'm sure that it is still in there, says that every police officer that meets an individual sizes up the individual as a potential threat before that individual even opens their mouth. And that is the reason why when a police officer approaches you, he has his hands on his gun as he's walking towards you. That's the training in the police academy. So what I'm saying that to say that we have to change the training and let police officers know that, no, yes, you have the badge and you have the gun. The gun can only be used if you are threatened. It just cannot be used just because you have it and you can use it at any moment. So the training needs to change. A lot of good police officers out there, but you have some police officers, just like when you're watching the movies, there are good guys with the gun and there are bad guys with the gun. Guess who is going to shoot? It's the bad guy with the gun. It's not the good guy with the gun. So you have those kinds of issues. So the training for me is very important. Not only the training, but to change the culture of the police department, the culture that police officers are there to serve and protect. They are not there to intimidate individuals in society, and also take the cultural perspective out of it, that an individual's culture should not determine whether that individual is predisposed to commit a crime or not. So there is a lot of work to be done to change the thinking in society regarding policing and regarding how police reacts to individuals.
And Dr. O'Rourke, if you take the time to look at the work by the National Organization of Black Law Executives, NOBLE, once you look at that, they have reform in there, and they were part of this whole reform in the United States, how officers should do, must do the training. But I thoroughly agree with what you're talking about, because we can certainly make a better America. We do what we're supposed to do. And it's the human nature of everything that we're talking about today. How to not fix it, how do we repair what's happening in the United States? Because regardless of race, creed, color, sex, religion, and national origin, people are concerned, people are hurting. There's a study in Baltimore, Maryland about young people and police officers, post-traumatic stress disorder, if you will. Young people in Baltimore, Maryland are suffering from that. Children are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, the same disorder they gave veterans in the 60s, leaving out of Vietnam, with the average age being 19 going to that war. But also the research showed that police officers also were suffering from PTSD. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. And Tim, we'll turn it back over to you for your audience to address questions.
Great. Thank you so much. We covered a lot of ground, and I know that if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. It's in the Zoom panel. I posted a note in the chat about that. So if any of our audience members have any questions of our panel, please use that Q&A, and we'll get to those. First one we have is, can you talk about how the COVID situation is connected, if at all, with any of the civil unrest issues that we're seeing right now? Are they linked? Are they completely separate? Are they just happening by chance at the same time? Or is this something that is a cause and effect type of situation, in your opinion?
So we will defer to Dr. Joshua, since he's on the medical side of the house, to see if there has been any relationships.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing, Tim, whoever asked that question is a great question. I think there's a combination. Now, some of the things that were happening before the COVID-19 coronavirus even came in, and that's what Dr. Michael O'Rourke and I are talking about. Whether COVID was here or not, we were still seeing this unrest with police officers in this country, which need to be corrected. Now, what makes it very, very difficult is that because there are people at home and people are not doing normally what they are doing, and they're in the streets more, there is some sort of relationship, but not a relationship to the point that I need to be killed for just walking down the street, or killed because a question is asked, or killed because I'm hanging out at a witness because I'm too intoxicated to make it home, whatever the case. So I don't want to link those two, because one, I know that we can, as Michael say, kill or cure, but I know one that we yet don't have the vaccine for, and that's the COVID-19. So I would not link those two together in that sense.
Okay. How, we talked a lot about trust, and I think that that's an important word to use. How do we start to foster that and create that within our communities?
I think that trust really comes from a level of understanding culture, understanding our differences, and just not understanding it, but understanding and being acceptance of our differences. I am, you are. I accept you, you accept me. And let's not try to change people from being who they are or their ideologies. But in many ways, accepting them. Diversity is very good. It has enabled us to stimulate a lot of innovations within this country. And I just see that, that it is the way forward. Now, in building trust, that's a very difficult endeavor, but very simplistically, trust is manifested from authenticity, from transparency, and accountability. I think that those are the three pillars of being authentic and what we do, what we say, who we are, having a level of transparency, and holding ourselves accountable for our actions. I think that those are the pillars that place us on a better road towards building trust within our communities.
And that's something that doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes time to build. It does not
happen overnight. And because I am an African American female, it doesn't mean that every other African American females will trust me being in the position that I am in. There are also some other isms that we have to deal with. There's a classism, and there are, all of these other socioeconomic indicators that come into play here. So, but being in the community, first of all, and not just going to the community when we need a deliverable from a grant project or when we need, something from the community, but actually within our universities, shattering that ivory tower mentality, bringing our community to the campus, during the summer, having activities for the communities, for the children, for the pre-collegiate students is one way that we have been able to bridge this gap throughout various states. And people will begin to recognize you as a trusted source. So no, it does not happen overnight, but it can happen. It can happen. And I think that people are truly looking for those trusted resources or those trusted sources within our communities.
Those trusted sources.
Something to that.
Go ahead, Doc.
I was going to add something to that in saying that trust and perception, there's a relationship between trust and perception. When you perceive someone in a positive way, then you seem to draw closer to that individual. I want to give just a short vignette. I'm sure that almost everyone has seen that movie. When NASA was trying to put a mission in space, how the Black female was rejected when she offered some ideas. sitting in the room and watching all of these men who happen to be European males, sitting there making decisions about how to put this machine in space. And she is sitting here and they're fumbling through, putting all these mathematical formulas on the board, and they couldn't come up with the answer about how to move this process. She raised up her hand as she sat there as a secretary in the room, but she had a degree in physics. Sitting here as a Black female and saying, I could tell them what the answer is. That's what is going through our mind. But they never trusted her, because I think what happens is that we let our historical understanding of where individuals stood and where they came from decide how we perceive them. And how we perceive them keeps society from tapping into the knowledge base that we have. We all have this knowledge base that can generate magnificent positive things for society, but we have to move beyond what we're seeing in front of us and make that attempt to approach individuals. I don't mind going into any area in the community to shop in any grocery store, but I couldn't say that about a lot of people in society. When did you have to ask yourself, when did I go across town and stop at a grocery store in a neighborhood that didn't look like mine and see what they're selling inside there or buy something? I think that begins to raise some concerns in your mind about how we deal with each other in society.
And I've got to go here, having been a school superintendent and really enjoy their work with young people, riding the school buses. There's a term in the Bible that talks, Dr. O'Rourke, about burden, but there's a German term that's defined as Verstein. Put yourself in the position of the people sometimes that you might be afraid to trust or afraid to be around. I sent my school teachers on that same bus or buses throughout the county. And once that occurred, they then could see where young people live. Their whole attitude about the community changed into a trust system that says we must educate it, because if we don't educate on this side of the railroad track, the students on that side of the railroad track gonna learn how to come to the other side of the railroad track. That trust is there, but the word that I love is a word called empathy. We've got to learn the compassion and the passion and the love that we have for others, and stop seeing skin color and versus seeing the character of the man who might have the answer to what you're going on. Hey, there's a lot out there that by now we should have repaired. And I say that we see it in the sporting arena. We say, hey, you can run, you can jump, you can do all these things, but when you are not there, it's the same in education. There are some brilliant minds out here as a people. If collaboration takes place, you can build that trust. Because once a person says to you, you can trust me, they should be able to do that because they can have faith that you're going to deliver based upon what they've already done for you. That would change the whole game of what we're dealing with right now in the United States of America. I would love for it to change. I really would.
So how can, we've got a lot of institutions of higher education that are part of our membership. How can those institutions best support your efforts to improve and enhance predominantly minority communities within their regions without infringing or making efforts more challenging?
Well, I can say that my units, both at in the state of Georgia, and in particular within the state of Alabama, have been able to partner with various ecosystems, not only within the university systems, but also within corporate. For those of you who know the Huntsville community, you know that we have a very robust federal government system, the NASA, the DoD community, which is multi-billions of dollars. And so we have been able to establish partnerships. I think it goes back to the point that I made, just the transparencies, inviting people to the table to make decisions and to be a part of your collaboration at its inception. None of us want to become an afterthought to say that, well, we need an HBCU commitment here in order to get this proposal funded. Let's start the partnerships, let's start the engagement, the exchange before we really need each other. Because right now, where I sit, I've been blessed to have such a significant network across the nation, really, and in particular within the state of Alabama, that all I have to do is pick up the phone and call people and know they do not look like me. But it does take work, it does take practice, and it does take commitment and follow through. And I think that what you will find is that the same scholarship that exists on other campuses also exists on HBCU. We have researchers who have produced patents. We have a research foundation on our campus that deals with multi-million-dollar federal contracts. We have been involved with NASA projects, with Department of Defense, looking at IED detection devices, transformers, all nanotechnology, all of these kinds of things. So it starts small, but at least start the conversation. One of the best ways to start is to discovering each other's capabilities. And once you discover each other's capabilities, then you can form synergy and really begin to work together. I think that that's a good starting point for us.
It has to do also with issue of collaboration in and I think that you made a very good point that sometimes individuals, when they are sitting around the table, they only see themselves as being brought in as a token. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be a token. I think that individuals like to be involved from the ground level so they can make some contributions and be a part of the narrative, a part of the conversation. So it is collaboration. It is the understanding and the recognition that scholarship is similar and seamless across the board. You have individuals at historically Black colleges and universities who were educated at majority institutions, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Ivy League institutions, you name it. So you have to ask yourself the question, what happens to that knowledge that they gain from these places? Just because they're at HBCUs does not make them any less relevant than individuals who decided to stay at Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, or University of Maryland. So, I mean, it is that recognition of the fact that together we can make it. No one lives in a bubble. We don't live in a bubble, and no one wants any institution to write a program and then bring it to them to implement. I don't participate in programs like that. I don't think that that is the way it should work. I think that I feel more comfortable being a part of the conversation, being a part of the product, and having a buy-in to that product. Then we can help move it together.
And have the proactive stance of what you're talking about. Don't be reactive. Yes. And I tell you, to the question Tim asked about something later on with COVID and the racial unrest, just take COVID and what we're doing now. People from now on, Tim, moving forward to what Dr. Michael O'Rourke and Dr. Risa O'Rourke are talking about, they're going to take a proactive stance that they're going to put everybody at the table. It's kind of like, what's next? Let's think about, they're going to be, what if this occurred? What do we do now? How can we be better prepared? It's like if I'm sitting over with $100 billion in my wallet and schools around me only have 10,000. The best way for me to help that overall community to build trust and collaboration is to share the wealth. Because I tell people all the time, you can be the smartest or the brightest person, but if your car breaks down and have a flat tire, it's going to be somebody who might not have the same intelligence as you who's going to change your tire. Yeah. You got to look at it. I often tell people sometimes the welder sometimes make more money than the doctor. and I actually met a doctor one time. Man, I said, man, I'm a doctor. He said, well, then why? He said, man, the insurance got me, that got me. So I started going to welding. I went to welding because I can make more money doing that. And I ain't have to worry about the insurance policy in terms of the suits. So when you start looking at that, you say that's a human being. You say that's one college or university. I don't care whether it's a PWI, HBCU. From now on, they're going to collaborate. And there are some people, you remember Dr. O'Rourke when Pepper Teller came and they were doing this whole piece with Albany State, and he asked Dr. Freeman the question, whose student is that walking down the street of Albany, Georgia? And Dr. Freeman said, more likely that's mine. He said, no, it's not. It's more likely it's mine because I have a virtual program that I can put that student online. They can wash dishes and they can go to work and they don't have to come on the campus all day and sit in the classroom and try to learn. So that's the new knowledge, Dr. O'Rourke, you often talk about.
Yeah.
How we take it and we take all this together to make happen. And we can do it because one of us is never smarter than all of us, and collectively we all can make the future a brighter future if we want. But think of the term again, burden and Verstein. But again, I go back to that big word Dr. Teresa used, trust.
So I put another plug in, Tim, for you, and said someone sent me a story the other day, and said there were two gentlemen on a boat down the river. One of them was the one paddling the canoe. He was paddling the canoe down the river, and this guy was sitting in the canoe. He was a researcher. So they were having this discussion, and the guy said the wind started blowing hard. And the guy said, well, I know all about the wind. The researcher says, I know all about the wind. The wind is going to come from the north. It's going to go east. It's going to go south. It's going to do this. And then the storm started coming. The waves started coming. And the canoe was just rocking. So the gentleman asked him, he says, well, you're an expert. You told me you have all the expertise. Do you know how to swim? He said, no, I don't know how to swim. He said, well, you're on your own. So that is the story that says that you can be an expert by yourself. Every piece of it has to fit like a Rubik's Cube. Every piece has to fit. And that's the collaborative part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that starting with trust is a great way to look at it. I think that as institutions and that those individuals that have that responsibility for not just what has been termed as economic recovery, but I think it's an opportunity for complete economic redesign. I think that's something that's definitely needed, and I appreciate your thoughts today, and look forward to continuing those thoughts as we continue. Recognizing we're coming up near the end of the hour now, I just want to share a few quick resources. First, keep the ideas coming. We do have our COVID-19 discussion group, which is more of an economic recovery discussion group. So as you have ideas, please feel free to share them in there. We do have our Awards of Excellence nomination deadline coming up July 1st. We're looking for those best practices and talent innovation in place. So please be sure if you have great initiatives that are going on. Hopefully all the doctors on the line can think of initiatives going on at Alabama A&M and will participate in that and share that with their network. But everyone on the line, please consider your initiatives for that Awards of Excellence. That's July 1st deadline. And then our digital summit is coming up. It's going to be like no other, where we're having ecosystems engage with each other and do brainstorming online. And it'll be roll up your sleeves, very collaborative. So please mark the dates of September 21st to 24th. Registration should be available shortly. And appreciate your consideration in attending that. On behalf of UEDA, and now I can't say it to his face, but please share my appreciation with Dr. Josh, and as well with both you, Dr. Teresa and Dr. Michael, for being with us today. Again, I'm sincere whenever I say I look forward to the continued conversations, and you've given us a lot to think about, and we'll continue to collaborate and work on that trust amongst ourselves and amongst our community. So thank you.
Thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Take care.
Okay, thank you.